The hospital lights buzzed faintly overhead as I clutched my son's tiny, fragile hand. Machines beeped steadily beside his bed, each sound a haunting reminder of how close I was to losing the most precious part of my world. Just hours before, he had been laughing, running around the living room in his little superhero cape. Now, he lay still, a breathing tube taped to his mouth, fighting for his life after a sudden, violent asthma attack. My heart felt like it had shattered into 1,000 pieces, and all I could do was sit beside him and pray for a miracle. I texted my mom, my hands shaking, asking her to come. I needed her. I was drowning in fear and helplessness, and I just needed my mother to walk through those doors, hold me, and tell me it would be okay. But instead of a comforting reply, her message flashed back cold and unbelievable. Can't make it right now. You know we're still setting up for Sarah's birthday. Hope everything's okay. I stared at the screen, stunned. My niece's birthday party? That was more important? I wanted to scream, to cry, to make her understand that this wasn't just a small scare. This was her grandson's life hanging in the balance. But her words made it clear. Decorations and cake had taken priority over an emergency. I felt betrayed. Alone. I had always believed that family showed up when it mattered most. That when everything else in the world fell apart, you could count on blood. But at the very moment I needed support the most, my own mother made it clear where she stood. My mind spun with questions. Was I asking too much? Was I overreacting? Or had she always been this emotionally distant, and I was just too blinded by hope to see it? The doctor stepped in then, his expression unreadable, and my heart stopped. I rose to my feet, bracing for the worst, while my phone buzzed again. Another text. Did you grab the candles from the car earlier? We might be short. That was the moment something in me snapped. I looked at my son, so small and pale against the white sheets, and I knew things would never be the same. Not with my mother. Not with the people I once believed would always be there for me. I turned off my phone, took a deep breath, and walked into a future I wasn't prepared for, one where I might lose the one person who meant everything, and already felt like I'd lost another who was supposed to care just as much. And that was just the beginning. Because what happened next would test not only my faith in family, but my strength as a mother. What do you do when the person who raised you walks away in your darkest hour, and you're forced to face it all alone? The hours in that hospital room moved painfully slow, like time itself was holding its breath with me. My son, Jacob, barely 8 years old, remained unconscious. His little chest rose and fell with the help of machines, each breath a borrowed one. The doctors said we were lucky we brought him in when we did, but even that didn't ease the terror that gripped my heart. There was no certainty, just hope and fear. I kept replaying everything in my head. That morning had started so normal. Jacob had just finished his breakfast and was watching cartoons when he suddenly started wheezing. At first, I thought it was his usual asthma acting up. He'd had flare-ups before, and usually his inhaler calmed it down. But this time it escalated fast, too fast. Within minutes, he was gasping, clutching his chest, eyes wide with panic. I called 911 with shaking hands while trying to keep him calm, but even I could hear the panic in my own voice. I had thrown on shoes, barely remembering to grab my bag as the paramedics took him. In the ambulance, I held his hand while tears streamed down my face. The paramedics tried to reassure me, but I could see it in their eyes. This was serious. They were working fast, urgently, as if every second counted. Because it did. So yes, when I texted my mom, it wasn't out of habit, it was desperation. I needed someone to lean on. Someone to be there. And when she brushed me off for a birthday party, I felt something break inside. It wasn't just the rejection, it was what it said about our relationship, what it said about how much she really cared. Growing up, my mom was always distracted. She loved us, I know she did, but her way of showing love always felt conditional. She was the kind of mother who remembered your report card, but forgot your favorite color. She'd bake cookies for the school fundraiser, but forget your school play. She wanted things to look good on the outside, even if it meant ignoring the cracks inside. I used to tell myself she was doing her best, that maybe she just didn't know how to show up emotionally. But tonight, as I sat by Jacob's bed, I couldn't make those excuses anymore. The truth was, this wasn't the first time she'd let me down. When I was pregnant with Jacob, she had told me I was making a mistake. Too young, too unprepared. And when I decided to keep the baby and raise him alone after his father left, she didn't offer help. Instead, she offered criticism, silence, and eventually distance. I had worked 2 jobs to make ends meet. I had stayed up late finishing online classes so I could get a better job. Every bit of stability I had built, I had done without her. And yet, I still wanted her there when it mattered. Still clung to the hope that maybe, just maybe, she would finally show up for me. But now I knew better. People don't change just because you need them to. And some wounds run too deep to simply forget. My phone buzzed again. I didn't want to look, but I did. This time it was a photo. My niece Sarah, blowing out candles, smiling wide, surrounded by balloons and cupcakes. My mom stood behind her, grinning like everything in the world was just fine. And maybe for her, it was. I stared at that photo until my eyes blurred with tears. Not out of jealousy, but disappointment. How could she celebrate when her grandson was clinging to life? How could she smile knowing I was here, breaking apart? The nurse came in to check Jacob's vitals. She gave me a soft smile and told me he was stable for now, but still not out of danger. I nodded, thanked her, and wiped my face before sitting back down. My thoughts spiraled. Was this how it was going to be from now on? Was I truly alone in this? The weight of that thought crushed me. I had always believed that no matter how flawed a family could be, in the end, they would be there when it mattered most. But that belief was starting to look more like a fantasy I'd told myself for too long. I kept thinking of the party, the cake, the laughter, how my mom had chosen that over being here, over being with Jacob. And I couldn't help but wonder, if something happened to him, would she regret her decision? Or would she just tell herself she did what she thought was right? A noise broke through my thoughts. A faint, struggling cough from the bed. My eyes shot to Jacob. He was still unconscious, but it was a sign. A sign that maybe he was fighting, that he wasn't giving up. I stood quickly, reaching for his hand again, whispering softly, telling him I was right here, that I wasn't going anywhere. And I meant it. No matter what happened next, no matter who else showed up or didn't, I would be here. For him. Always. But deep down, I knew this moment was only the start. The real test was yet to come. Because when this night ended and the machine stopped beeping, I'd have to face what came after. The damage. The choices. And whether I could forgive a mother who never chose me when it mattered most. I didn't sleep that night. Not even for a second. I sat there beside Jacob, listening to the rhythmic sound of the machines, holding his hand and watching his chest rise and fall. Every breath he took gave me a little hope, but the fear never left. It clung to me like a shadow, whispering worst-case scenarios in the back of my mind. I kept thinking about everything I'd done leading up to this. Did I miss a warning sign? Could I have caught something sooner? Was this my fault somehow? Around 4 a.m., a nurse came in with a cup of coffee and sat it gently on the windowsill. "You need something in you," she said softly, not wanting to wake Jacob. I gave her a quiet thank you and took a small sip. It was bitter and cold, but I drank it anyway. That small act of kindness felt like the first real support I'd had all night. A few hours later, Jacob's doctor came by for morning rounds. He explained that Jacob had suffered a severe asthma attack that caused his oxygen levels to drop dangerously low. They had managed to stabilize him, but he was still at risk. The next 24 hours were critical. I nodded silently, absorbing his words, even though every part of me felt like crumbling. Still no word from my mom. Not even a quick, "How is he?" That silence hit harder than anything else. And it wasn't just about last night anymore. It brought up everything I had tried to bury over the years. The constant emotional distance, the way she always seemed more invested in appearances than people, especially me. I started to remember birthdays she skipped, the times she forgot school meetings, and how she always had something more important to do. There was also the tension between her and Jacob. She loved him in her own way, I suppose, but she was never warm with him, always correcting, criticizing, or brushing him off when he tried to talk about something that excited him. He once asked me, "Why doesn't Grandma like me?" And I remember brushing it off, telling him she was just busy or tired. But maybe he sensed it too. Maybe kids always know more than we think. Around noon, Jacob finally stirred. His eyelids fluttered, and his fingers twitched in mine. My heart leapt. I leaned in close and whispered, "Mommy's here, baby. You're okay." He didn't open his eyes yet, but that slight movement was enough. It was more than I'd had all night. It was hope. That same moment, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a call. My mom. I stared at the screen for a long second before answering. Her voice came through the line, casual at first. "Hey, I just wanted to check in. How's everything?" I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. "He's in the ICU, Mom. He's been unconscious all night." There was a pause. "Oh." I didn't realize it was that serious. I bit my tongue so hard it hurt. "I told you he was rushed to the hospital. I told you he couldn't breathe." "Well, I thought you were just panicking again. You know how you get sometimes." That hit like a slap. "This isn't about me being dramatic, Mom. This is your grandson's life." Another pause. Then she said something that sealed it. "I didn't want to scare Sarah on her birthday. I figured you'd call again if it got worse." There it was. The truth, plain and cold. She didn't come because it would have been inconvenient. Because her idea of family meant showing up only when it didn't interfere with her own schedule. I couldn't even respond. I just hung up and put the phone down slowly, as if even touching it made me feel dirtier. I didn't cry this time. I was too numb. I just sat beside Jacob, my hand in his, and tried to focus on him. But somewhere deep down, something in me was starting to shift. I started wondering how I would explain this to him later. What would I tell him about the grandmother who wasn't there when he needed her most? And what kind of example was I setting by continuing to let her in our lives when she kept hurting us in these small but cutting ways? At that moment, another subplot began to unravel in my mind. My relationship with my sister, Emma. We hadn't spoken in months. She was my mother's favorite, always had been. The golden child, the one who could do no wrong. It was Emma's daughter's birthday party my mom had been so desperate to attend. I wondered if she even told Emma what was happening with Jacob. I wouldn't be surprised if she didn't. That would have ruined the party vibes. But then I started thinking, what if Emma knew and didn't say anything? I couldn't shake the feeling that this went deeper than one bad choice. Maybe this family had cracks I'd been ignoring for far too long. And now, as I sat there, I started to question everything. Had I been fighting to hold together a bond that never really existed? Was I the only one who ever truly cared? The more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't just about a sick child or a missed phone call. It was about years of being overlooked, dismissed, and expected to quietly accept it all. But this time, something was different. This time, I wasn't sure I could keep pretending. And the worst part? I still didn't know how far things would go before it all finally broke. Jacob opened his eyes later that afternoon. Not fully, just a slow flutter, confused and heavy, but enough for the nurse to call the doctor in, and enough for me to feel my knees buckle in pure relief. I leaned over, brushing his damp hair back, whispering softly, "You're okay, baby. You're safe." He couldn't speak, not yet, but his fingers curled weakly around mine. That single movement made every sleepless night and every painful second worth it. But even in that quiet joy, the tension in my chest wouldn't let up. Because deep down, I knew the storm outside that hospital room wasn't over. If anything, it was getting worse. News of Jacob's condition slowly trickled to other relatives, though not because my mother said anything. It was me, texting a few cousins, posting a quick update in the family group chat because I knew someone would ask eventually. The responses varied. Some were supportive. A couple offered to come by or send something. But then Emma messaged privately, and her words tightened something in my gut. Mom told me he was just having a mild reaction. Is he really in ICU? I stared at that message for a long time. So she didn't know. Mom hadn't told her. And just like that, another layer of betrayal sank in. Not only had she chosen not to be there for us, but she also made sure no one else was either. She had controlled the narrative to protect an image, to avoid disrupting a birthday party. That party seemed like such a distant, ridiculous event now. Balloons and cupcakes, while my son's lungs fought to keep him alive. I called Emma. I couldn't text this. Her voice picked up fast, a little rushed. Hey, what's going on? Why didn't you tell me Jacob was in the ICU? I did tell you, I said, barely keeping my voice steady. I told Mom. She knew everything. I thought she'd tell you. There was silence on the other end. She said it wasn't serious, that he was just being observed. I had no idea it got this bad. Yeah, I said bitterly, because God forbid anything take the spotlight off Sarah's birthday. Emma exhaled, and her tone shifted. I'm coming. I'm bringing food. Don't argue. A part of me was thankful. Another part couldn't forget that she hadn't questioned it until now. But when she showed up an hour later, carrying a bag of Jacob's favorite snacks and a stuffed bear under one arm, I didn't push her away. I didn't have the strength. Watching her walk over to his bed, gently placing the bear next to him, whispering his name like it was sacred, it brought back pieces of a sister I used to know. Maybe there was still some part of our family worth saving. But the cracks kept spreading. That evening, I received a voicemail from my mom. Her voice was calm. Too calm. I hope he's doing better. I just want you to know that I didn't mean to upset you. I just didn't want to cause panic or make things worse. You always react so strongly, and I didn't want Emma to stress over nothing. Over nothing. Those two words echoed in my ears until they burned. Jacob wasn't nothing. His life wasn't something to hide or downplay because it clashed with streamers and birthday photos. I gripped the edge of the windowsill, trying to breathe through the heat in my chest. I didn't even know what made me angrier, her dismissive tone, or the fact that she still thought she had done the right thing. Emma sat beside me, clearly reading my body language. She's not going to change, she said quietly. She's been like this our whole lives. Remember when I had that appendix surgery in college? She told everyone it was just a stomach bug so she wouldn't have to cancel her bridge night. I nodded slowly, memories I hadn't thought about in years resurfacing. Times we'd both been pushed aside, our pain minimized, our emotions brushed off. We had always just accepted it. But now, watching Jacob sleep, I knew I couldn't accept it anymore. Later that night, a nurse stepped in and asked if I had someone to stay with me. I think she saw the exhaustion in my face, the loneliness in my eyes. I told her Emma was here. And for the first time in days, I let someone else take the chair beside Jacob's bed while I went outside for air. I stepped into the hospital's courtyard, the sky already dark, the air cold against my skin. I stared up at the stars and felt more alone than ever, and yet more awake than I'd ever been. Everything was shifting. My relationship with my mother, with Emma, even the way I saw myself. I wasn't just Jacob's mom anymore. I was someone who had been pushed too far, too many times. I took out my phone and opened a blank message to my mom. My fingers hovered over the screen. I wanted to write everything, to tell her how she broke something in me this time, how I couldn't just move on like before. But I didn't send anything. Not yet. Because I knew what was coming next would change everything. The next morning, I walked back into Jacob's room with a clear head and swollen eyes. I hadn't slept much, again. But something about that quiet hour outside, under the cold stars and the endless sky, had shifted my focus. I wasn't waiting anymore. I wasn't hoping for things to fix themselves. I was watching everything clearly now, and what I saw was hard, but it was honest. Emma had stayed the night in a plastic hospital chair, head tilted to the side, one hand still resting on the edge of Jacob's bed. When I walked in, she opened her eyes slowly and gave me a tired smile. He woke up around 2 a.m., asked for apple juice. I told him you were right outside. I felt a rush of guilt for not being there at that exact moment, but also a strange comfort knowing he wasn't alone. I thanked her softly, and we both looked at him, still sleeping peacefully. The swelling in his face had gone down. His breathing sounded better. He was on his way back, and I could finally believe it. Then Emma cleared her throat. Mom texted me again this morning. I didn't react. She said she's coming. Today. That made my stomach tighten. Why now? Emma shrugged. I think she realized you're not going to do what you usually do. You're not brushing it off this time. I didn't say anything. I didn't know what to say. Part of me felt anxious. Was I ready to face her? And the other part felt like she didn't deserve to be here now, showing up after everything was safe, when the worst had already passed. Emma stood, stretched, then gave me a knowing look. She doesn't know you're thinking about cutting her off, does she? I haven't decided, I admitted. But something's different this time. I'm not sure I can just let it go. Emma nodded, quietly. I wouldn't blame you if you didn't. We fell into silence again, but it didn't last. Because not 20 minutes later, my phone rang again. This time it was a different number, local, but unfamiliar. I stepped into the hallway to answer it, unsure what to expect. A woman's voice greeted me, calm and clipped. Is this Jacob's mother? This is Ms. Rivera from Child and Family Services. I froze. Yes, this is she. What's going on? She took a breath before continuing. We received a report late last night about a medical neglect concern regarding your son's asthma care. We're required to follow up with an in-person interview while he's admitted. I'm on my way to the hospital now. I leaned against the wall, heart pounding.
What?
That doesn't make any sense. He had a sudden attack. He's never had one this bad before. I've always managed it. I understand, ma'am. These calls are often precautionary. But once a report is made, we're required to investigate. I'll see you shortly. She hung up. My mind raced. Who would report me? Who would accuse me of neglecting Jacob's health after everything I've done, after everything I've sacrificed? I went back into the room, trying to keep calm, but Emma took one look at me and stood up. What happened? There's a social worker coming. Someone reported me for medical neglect. Emma's eyes widened.
What? Who would do that?
I don't know, I said slowly. But in my heart, a chilling suspicion was already forming. It didn't take long for Ms. Rivera to arrive. She was professional, polite but firm. She asked to speak privately in the hallway. I explained everything. The routine Jacob had been on, how we'd always followed his doctor's instructions, how fast the attack had come on. She took notes, nodded along, then said something that made my blood run cold. The report said you've ignored medical signs for weeks and failed to provide proper care. It also mentioned you leave your son alone frequently while at work. I nearly choked. That's not true. I work from home now, and I've never ignored anything. I took him to his last checkup 2 weeks ago. She gave a gentle nod. I understand. But the report came from someone who identified themselves as a concerned family member. A family member. That narrowed it down. And somehow, I didn't need confirmation. In my gut, I knew. It was her. My mother. I walked back into the room in a daze. Emma looked at me and saw the storm in my face. Who is it? She asked softly. A family member, I whispered. It had to be Mom. Emma didn't say anything for a second. Then she said, she's scared. Scared of how this all makes her look. Scared that you're finally drawing a line. That doesn't justify what she did, I snapped, more to myself than to Emma. She didn't come when Jacob was fighting for his life, but now she shows up after calling CPS on me? Emma looked conflicted. Do you want me to tell her not to come? I shook my head slowly.
No.
Let her come. Let her see the damage for herself. But this time, I won't protect her from it. My heart pounded as I stood by the window, watching the street below. Somewhere out there, my mother was probably already on her way. She had no idea what kind of storm she was walking into. But for once, I wasn't the one afraid. Because this time, I wasn't going to stay silent. I didn't have to wait long. Less than an hour after the social worker left the room, my mom arrived. She walked in like she always did, shoulders back, purse tight against her arm, a soft smile that never quite reached her eyes. But this time, there was something different about the way I looked at her. I didn't see the woman who had once tucked me into bed or bandaged my scraped knees. I saw someone who had chosen to protect her image over my child's life. Someone who had called authorities on her own daughter under the pretense of concern, when all she really wanted was control. She stepped inside, immediately glancing toward Jacob's bed. He was awake now, sitting up with help, sipping apple juice and watching cartoons with Emma beside him. He looked better. Color had returned to his cheeks, and his eyes tracked the screen with sleepy curiosity. "Oh, sweetheart," she breathed, walking over and placing a hand on his head. "You gave Grandma such a scare." Jacob didn't say anything. He looked up at her for a second, then turned back to the TV. That stung a little. Even for her, I could tell. I stood at the foot of the bed, arms crossed. "You're late," I said. She turned, still keeping her voice soft. "I came as soon as I could. I didn't want to overwhelm you. I thought it'd be better once he was stable." "Did you also think it'd be better to report me for neglect?" I asked. Her face didn't even flinch, just a slight tilt of the head. "I did what I had to do. You were exhausted, emotional. I thought someone needed to step in before things got worse." I laughed under my breath. "Worse than ICU? Because while you were picking out cake frosting, I was holding his hand while he couldn't breathe." She lifted her chin. "You always twist everything. I didn't want to make things about me, but you did," I said quietly. "By not coming. By making sure no one else did. And then by throwing me under the bus when you realized I wasn't going to sweep it under the rug." Emma stood now, slowly, her eyes narrowing. "You didn't just report her," she said. "You lied. You said she left Jacob alone. That's not just concern, Mom. That's dangerous." My mother's eyes flickered. The room had grown too quiet, the tension pushing down on all of us. For once, she didn't have a smooth line to deflect with. Instead, she looked at me and said, "You're making this into a war."
I was just trying to help.
"No," I said calmly. "You were trying to punish me. Because I made you uncomfortable. Because I didn't put your birthday party or your reputation above my son's life." Jacob shifted a little in bed. "Mom," he said quietly, his voice hoarse. I turned immediately, walking to his side. "Yes, sweetheart. Can we go home soon?" I smiled and smoothed his hair.
"Soon.
"I promise." Behind me, I heard Emma speaking again. "You need to leave, Mom. You've done enough." My mother stood frozen for a moment, then looked down at Jacob one last time. Her face hardened, not angry, but almost unreadable. "You'll regret cutting me out," she said, her voice low. "You'll see how much you needed me." Then she turned and walked out without another word. The silence she left behind felt louder than anything she could have said. Emma stood at the door, watching her go. I stayed next to Jacob, holding his hand. I thought that was the end. That we had reached the peak of it, the betrayal, the confrontation, the fallout. But I was wrong. 3 days later, just before we were scheduled to take Jacob home, I received a letter from my lawyer's office. Apparently, someone had attempted to file an emergency custody petition claiming I was unfit to care for Jacob and suggesting temporary guardianship should go to his maternal grandmother, my mother. I sat on the hospital bed, letter trembling in my hands, and felt the world spin again. Emma's voice cracked as she read over my shoulder. "She's not stopping. She's really doing this." It felt surreal. This wasn't just about a birthday party anymore. This wasn't even about me. It was about power, control. She couldn't handle being told no. So now she was trying to take the one thing she knew would break me, my son. But she didn't realize something had changed. I wasn't the daughter who kept her mouth shut to keep peace. I wasn't the girl desperate for approval. I was a mother now. And this time, I was ready to fight. I looked at Jacob, smiling faintly, drawing with the nurse on a whiteboard, and I knew this wasn't over. But for the first time, I wasn't scared. I was furious. And I was focused. Because you don't mess with a mother protecting her child. And maybe my mom had started this war. But I was going to end it. The hospital discharge felt like a breath I'd been holding for too long. As I buckled Jacob into the car seat, his fingers wrapped weakly around mine, I realized how close I'd come to losing everything. But I also knew something had shifted inside me, something strong, unshakable. This wasn't just about healing Jacob's lungs anymore. It was about reclaiming peace, drawing boundaries, and refusing to let guilt blur what was right. Back home, everything felt the same yet different. The toys scattered in the living room, the smell of his favorite blanket, the half-done laundry. It all reminded me that real life had been waiting patiently for us to return. Emma stayed a few days longer. She helped set up a humidifier in Jacob's room, organized his medications, and even picked up some groceries. We didn't talk much about our mom.
We didn't need to.
Her absence had already said enough. The custody threat hung over me like a gray cloud, but I didn't let it consume me. My lawyer advised me not to panic. The petition was poorly put together, full of assumptions and emotional language, but no real evidence. The judge dismissed it without a hearing. Just like that, it was over. At least on paper. Emotionally, I knew I still had a lot to unpack. A few days later, a card came in the mail. From my mom. A cream-colored envelope with her perfect cursive handwriting. I opened it carefully, expecting some backhanded apology or more manipulative guilt. But it was short. Only one line. You'll always be my daughter, whether you like it or not.
No signature.
No love.
Just that.
I stared at it for a long time, then folded it in half and slid it into the back of a drawer. That sentence told me everything I needed to know.
She still didn't understand.
In the weeks that followed, Jacob got stronger. He was back to running through the house, laughing at cartoons, and asking for pancakes with extra syrup. We went to follow-up appointments, stuck closely to his new asthma plan, and I made sure to keep his environment calm and safe. I even reduced my freelance workload just to spend more time with him. Some days were harder than others, but I had clarity now. And it was powerful. Emma called often. We got closer than we'd ever been before. It turns out she'd spent a lifetime feeling second best to Mom too, always quietly playing the peacemaker. But now, for the first time, we were standing together on our own terms. Not trying to fix anyone. Not trying to earn love that should have been freely given. Looking back, I don't think my mother ever meant to become the kind of person who hurt people like this. But intent doesn't erase harm. And love, real love, doesn't show up only when it's convenient. It doesn't manipulate. It doesn't punish when boundaries are set. And it certainly doesn't try to take someone's child just because you're no longer in control. People always talk about how family should stick together no matter what. But I've learned that's only true when the bond is built on respect and care. Otherwise, staying just becomes another form of self-abandonment. And I won't do that anymore. Not for anyone. One evening, as I tucked Jacob into bed, he looked up at me and whispered, "You didn't leave me." I paused, my heart catching. "Of course not, baby," I said. "I'll never leave you." He nodded and drifted off to sleep, holding my finger in his small hand. That moment reminded me why I fought so hard. Why I'll keep fighting, no matter what. This story didn't end the way I expected it to. It wasn't a dramatic showdown in a courtroom or some big, tearful apology. It was quiet,
Subtle.
but real. I walked away from someone who couldn't respect the love I have for my son. I chose peace over pressure, truth over image. And in doing so, I found something even more valuable than resolution. I found strength. Sometimes the hardest thing isn't fighting back. It's walking away. Especially when the person you're walking away from is family. But walking away doesn't mean hate. It doesn't mean revenge. It just means choosing what's right for your soul and for the people who truly matter. So, if you've ever felt torn between loyalty to family and protecting your peace, let this be a reminder. You are allowed to choose yourself. You are allowed to break the cycle. And most of all, you are allowed to let go, without apology. Because love, real love, should never make you feel small. And when it does, it's time to stop asking for crumbs and start building a life that feeds your spirit fully.
Completely.
Without fear. Jacob and I, we're doing just that. And we're finally free.